Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for attending our first virtual graduate and professional expo. My name is Julia. I'm the community-based research assistant with Careerspace at Trent University. So Careerspace provides an authentic outlook on the career landscape by providing Trent students and alumni with meaningful experiences, necessary perspectives, and valuable resources. We offer virtual appointments, workshops, online resources, and opportunities to connect with employers and recruiters. These services are free for all Trent students and alumni. You can visit our website, trentu.ca/careerspace, to book an appointment or learn about our services. We are thrilled to have representatives from the Anthropology Graduate Program at Trent University with us here today. Before we go ahead and get started, I do have some housekeeping items to mention. I would ask our presenters to please go ahead now and place your contact information in the chat box. We should have 10 to 15 minutes for questions and discussion after the presentation by Jocelyn and Paul today. Please feel free to ask your questions at any time using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And today's presentation will also be posted to our Careerspace YouTube channel. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests from Anthropology, and ask that you please introduce yourself. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Williams. I'm the director of the Anthropology Graduate Program. I'm an associate professor in the department. My area of research specialty is human bioarchaeology. In particular, I'm interested in investigating diet and health in past populations, and in particular around periods of cultural change like colonization, for example. I'm joined today as well by my colleague, Dr. Paul Schbach, who is a Canada Research Chair in our department. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself a bit more and give them a bit of sense of your research?
Yeah, sure. So my research is kind of sitting where the scientific methods interact with archaeological questions that we might ask. A lot of this has to do about understanding how previous environments functioned, how humans might have impacted their environments. And a lot of my research now is either in the Arctic or in South America, in Peru and in Chile. So in the Arctic, it's very much about what was the environment like, and in Peru and Chile, how did people manage their crops? How did they produce food? How did that change as societies became bigger and more complex?
Great, thank you. A little bit of a program overview. So the master's program in our department is one of the oldest at Trent University. It was founded in 1974. We have 15 faculty in our department who participate in our graduate program. And their research covers a variety of disciplines, including archaeology, public archaeology, zoo archaeology, landscape and environmental archaeology, the archaeology of art, for example. We also have faculty that work in bioarchaeology and isotope biogeochemistry. We have one faculty member who does cultural anthropology, ethnography, and then we also have faculty that do ancient Greek and Roman studies. And these faculty do research in a variety of locations, such as North America, South America, Mesoamerica, Asia, and Europe. We have a two-year thesis-based program. The first year is generally comprised of coursework, so that would include a method and theory course, as well as a research design course. And then your third course is normally with your supervisor and relates to your thesis research and your kind of career goals. And in general, our students undertake field work and lab work towards the latter half of their first year and into the summer and early fall. And then in the second year, our students focus on writing their thesis and then ultimately defending their thesis in an oral defense. Our cohort is generally around 10 to 15 students. This year it's a bit smaller because of the COVID outbreak. Some of our students deferred their acceptance, but we generally are looking for a cohort of around 10 to 12 students. So the application process is now open. The deadline to apply is by February 1st of 2021. In this application, you need to include a plan of study that normally clearly articulates what it is you want to study and what research you'd like to undertake. And then also normally the plan of study identifies potential supervisors. In order to successfully be considered for our program, you need to have a joint or single honors Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Arts in anthropology or a closely related field. You need to have an average of at least a B+ or 77% in the last 2 years of your undergraduate degree. Generally, when our students are accepted to our program, we do offer them funding. They normally have a graduate teaching assistantship in year 1 and year 2. If your grades allow it, there is an entrance scholarship. And then sometimes supervisors also have sources of funding that they can provide in addition to these funding streams. And then you can also apply for funding. You can apply for funding through the federal government, through the provincial government, through Trent University, through our program, as well as the Trent University Archaeological Research Center. So there are additional ways to secure funding. We do have many faculty in our program who are actively recruiting and accepting students right now. A great place to learn about this is to look at our Facebook page, to look at our department or program page. You can also follow some labs on Instagram. So Paul Schbach, for example, has a Instagram account for his lab. I think is it Trent.isotope? Is that right, Paul?
To be honest, I don't know because someone else made Dane's Instagram, but
okay.
It's something like that.
I think it's at Trent.isotope. So maybe, Paul, I'll give you this opportunity to talk a little bit about the sorts of research that you're recruiting students for at the moment, if you want, and maybe tell them a little bit about your lab group and how that functions to kind of integrate your cohort.
Sure. So in my lab group, we kind of focus on specific types of analyses. So we do chemical analyses on things like bones and ancient plant remains from archaeological sites, as well as paleontological sites. We do something called stable isotope analysis on those materials. And so students work on a variety of different projects, and I organize the students who are sort of being supervised by me into a research group, a lab research group. So we have weekly meetings that are organized around the group. People talk about the kind of research that they're working on. And I have students in anthropology as well as in the environmental and life sciences PhD program. So people are working on sort of a diverse range of projects. Those projects are often associated with a larger research grant or program that a supervisor might have. So for example, I have one of those to look at ancient agricultural practices and animal management practices in the Andes. So I'm looking at llamas and alpacas and things like that. And then I have a different grant to look at paleoecology, what the environment was like in the Arctic. How did polar bear diets, for example, change when the conditions got warmer in the past, and what that might tell us about what's going to happen when the climate continues to warm in the future. So students work on a variety of different projects, and we try to organize around the research group to give people structure as they move through the program. So once students finish with their coursework, sometimes it's easy to get lost in doing your research, and so this sort of helps to give some structure to that. So I'm definitely one of the people who Jocelyn mentioned is looking for graduate students. And if I could give you just a tip, is that you definitely want to try to get in touch with people, specific potential supervisors, before you apply. It's generally the case that people who have a strong application have identified a potential supervisor, have talked with them in advance. And speaking for myself personally, that's sort of the most important thing, more so than what's in the application necessarily, is the conversation or conversations I've had with those potential students in advance of them applying. So it is really important. It's also good that you can just get a sense of whether or not that person is even taking students, because they might be going on for a year. They might not be in sort of an upswing active area of research where they're taking students. There could be any number of factors. So you definitely want to do the groundwork on that before you apply.
Thank you, Paul. I'm just, as I'm talking, I'm just posting some information on the chat board that you would have seen had I been able to share my slides. Certainly a question that we get a lot of the time is, why would you pursue a master's, or what sorts of careers does a master's degree open up for you? And I would say that there's a lot of different opportunities for students who have completed a master's degree. And I can give you some examples of some of the things that our students are doing. So certainly we see a lot of master's students working in contract archaeology or cultural heritage management. So in order to hold an excavation permit, for example, you need to have a master's degree. So many of our students that are working in archaeology would require a master's degree to kind of move up in the chain of command or move up in their careers. And certainly if you want to be a curator, for example, you would need at least a master's degree. It's also a requirement of many PhD programs, or some other professional programs also require master's degrees. I have some of my former students who have used this as a kind of stepping stone to pursue additional degrees, but also some of my students have gone on to become research assistants or research associates for academics or other institutions like the name is escaping me, the World Health Organization. One of my students is a research assistant for the World Health Organization. So I think it opens a myriad of doors and a myriad of opportunities that aren't just academic. Certainly many of them are in the professional stream. Paul, can you think of other examples of careers that I missed, or did I kind of cover?
Yeah, I think you covered it. I know a lot of people who ended up going into law or into medicine or dentistry. I mean, technically you have any kind of degree to do that, but it does seem to be a lot of people that I know went that direction as well.
Right. Okay, good. I did just see a couple questions as well on the question board, so maybe I'll open the floor up for additional questions, but I'll start by answering the two that I see here. And I'm not positive that everybody's seeing the question, so just to make sure, I'll just repeat the question. So one is about mentoring and advising. How does it work in our department? So when you're accepted to our program, you are assigned a supervisor, and then you also are assigned 2 additional committee members. So there's a group of 3 who are involved with your project. So you don't normally interact with all 3 on a regular basis, but we do have regular yearly meetings where we bring the entire committee together. But you do work very closely with your supervisor. So it could be weekly meetings, which is what Paul and myself do with our students. It could be bi-weekly meetings. It could also include things like, as Paul outlined, a lab meeting where you're working with a group of individuals that are connected through the lab, through their work, and you meet on a regular basis. So there is certainly a lot of that one-on-one interaction and mentoring with your supervisor. And then there's also interaction with the faculty who teach the 2 core courses. And they work very closely with you in that first year, working through those materials. And also you have your cohort, your group of students that are in the same year as you. You work together. And I think both those cohort interactions and your instructor and your supervisor interactions, I think really do a great job of connecting you to multiple kind of groups and individuals in that first year. So hopefully that answers your question. Is there anything you wanted to add on that one, Paul? Or
that all sounds great. And I think the one thing I was going to say when I saw the question earlier was that it's fairly diverse what that sort of mentoring might look like from one supervisor to the next. So another good reason to try to talk with somebody in advance, if you can get a sense of what that experience might be like for you to be mentored by that person, that could be really useful. And for you to think about what kind of experience you might be looking for. Is it something where you want a lot more independence? Do you want to be part of a group? Do you want, closer one-on-one mentoring that's a bit more hands-on? Something to think about.
Great, that's really helpful. Thanks, Paul. The other question that I see is about entrance scholarships or grants. So there are entrance scholarships that are offered. They are grade dependent. And then you can also apply for scholarships through the university. We do have bursaries as well through our department. There is a research grant that you can apply for through the Trent University Archaeological Research Center. So there are some additional sources of funding once you've been accepted to the program. And then you can apply for provincial funding, the Ontario Graduate Scholarship. You can also apply for federal funding, normally through the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, but also sometimes we have students who work generally for Paul that would apply through the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. I'm stuttering a bit there because I don't generally apply to that funding body, but I think I got it right, didn't I, Paul?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. The new question, so do you accept students with a bachelor's degree in forensic science? We would generally consider that a degree that's kind of compatible with anthropology. So again, it would somewhat depend on who you're applying to work with, and it would also depend on the courses that you have. But in general, we would see that as a kind of sister degree to anthropology. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but I'll certainly leave that open and watch for some more questions. We do have, maybe while I'm waiting for questions, I could also tell you a little bit about the facilities for those of you that maybe aren't from Trent or aren't from Peterborough and don't know Trent. Certainly we have a pretty large and extensive department at Trent. We're one of the larger departments in the social sciences and in Trent writ large. Many of the faculty in our department have a very well-established research program, which means that we have some pretty impressive state-of-the-art research facilities. So both Paul and myself do work with stable isotope analysis. So we have two labs that have a lot of equipment that are used to prepare and process samples for isotopic analysis. And then we have, not in our department, but at Trent, the Water Quality Center that does stable isotope analysis. And it's a very well-recognized center for isotope research. We have Professor Connolly, who does some work with mapping and landscape archaeology. He has quite an extensive collection, but he also has really interesting lab facilities that would allow for a lot of the GIS work, but that also pairs well with the imaging space at the library that was built, I think, a couple of years ago. And then Laura Dubras, who does groundware or lithic analysis, has a really impressive collection of microscopes and imaging technology related to her research. Maybe I'll stop there. I don't see any additional questions, but as Paul said, I think that's really important for those of you that are considering our program to reach out to supervisors and see if you can connect with them and learn about whether or not they're accepting students, what sources of funding they may have, what sorts of projects they may have available to you. But it is, I think, important for you to reach out prior to applying.
And now is a good time to do that too.
Yes.
I've had 4 or 5 Zoom meetings with people who have sent similar inquiries already. So it's definitely not early for you to start thinking about that, although you obviously don't have to have your application ready to go at this point. But
Right.
not too early to be reaching out to prospective supervisors.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that this is exactly the time you should be doing that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for all of those wonderful insights. We have about 5 more minutes if there are any other questions that come up. I do have some that I can ask if there are no kind of direct ones from people who are attending. I guess maybe I would be interested to know, as a student myself, how would you recommend going about reaching out to a faculty member, since you just kind of were mentioning that, and how do you know that it's a good match?
Can I jump in with one thing really quickly that I just want to say? Err on the side of being formal in your first contact. So, dear Dr. Williams, and be polite. I think it could be an immediate sort of problem for some people if your email is, hey Jack, and you know, blah 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 blah. So err on the side of being formal, using the right kind of format, treat it like a letter rather than a text message.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice. And Paul brings that up because we've all, I think, received emails from students that have been, hey, so-and-so, and it's very off-putting, kind of great first impression. One thing I would say is I think it's important for students to do a little bit of research. So that's why I gave the link to the department page, to the Facebook page, because that does give you the opportunity to identify what that faculty member does. Often we have links to personal websites or social media, which will allow you to kind of see what sorts of current research we're doing or what sorts of publications we've had in the past. So I would argue against kind of the form letter where it just doesn't demonstrate that you've kind of identified or singled out a particular individual. We talk to each other, so we know if we've all 15 faculty members have received the same form letter from that one student. So I would take the time to craft something specific and really do research and make sure that you're contacting people that are doing things that you're interested in doing. And it's also helpful if you kind of specify what you're interested in or ask questions about what sorts of research opportunities that faculty member might have.
Yeah, that's a great point. And showing that you've actually looked into what the person does and have some sense of that is a strong way to approach this. Not just is if you say, well, I really want to just live in this city, or the university is near my house, just looking for the next thing to do. That doesn't come off very well.
Thank you. I think that's all really great advice. We are coming up on the end and I don't see any more questions from students. So I will remind everybody that the contact information for the anthropology department and plenty of faculty in the anthropology graduate program is in the chat, the Zoom chat. Thank you so much to our presenters and to our students in attendance today for taking the time to learn about opportunities with the anthropology graduate program at Trent. I would also like to invite everybody to attend our Trent Graduate and Professional School Expo, which is being held on November 13th from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. To register, visit trentu.ca/SCP and click on the November 13th hold the date. So again, thank you so much, Jocelyn and Paul, for all of your wonderful insights.
Great, thanks very much for having us.
Thanks.